I know what you're thinking. Sewing has way too many weird, strange words and different sewing terminology that you have to learn, right? I know, because when I started learning to sew, it's like having to learn another language. So this video, I hope to explain what the backstitch is. It could also be called a backtack, a reverse, a strong stitch, just to make it a little bit more confusing for you. Let's get in and explain what it is. Welcome, ladies and gents. My name's Evelyn Wood, and if we haven't met yet, welcome. And I'm a vintage dressmaker specializing in vintage style, and I also teach sewing, and I help new sewers just like you learn how to sew. And this series is brought to you by my online sewing school, vintagesewingschool.com. I've put together this whole series of sewing terminology because there are so many strange words that you have to learn. Let's start today with the term backstitch. Now, what does this mean? A backstitch is a type of stitch that actually goes backwards over previously stitched stitches. It's usually done at the beginning and the end of a seam to kind of lock that seam in place. Let's explain this a little bit more though. As I mentioned, this might be called a backstitch, might be called a backtack, could be called a strong stitch, could be called reversing, it could be called lots of different things, but essentially it's the same thing. So first of all, it's usually done at the beginning and ending of seams so that they don't come apart. Why is this important? To demonstrate, I have two seams here. This one I've done with a backstitch, or a backtack as I usually call it, so if you're around here a lot, you'll get used to me calling it a backtack. So pick your own name that you like. This one here has the backstitch on it, and this one here has no backstitching, no reversing whatsoever. So if we have a closer look, if this was our seam, if we try and, actually let's start with the one that has nothing onto it, just straight stitching. If we look closely and we sort of pull this apart, you can see the stitches are coming apart, right? They're pulling apart. And if this was your seam, like on a garment, you can imagine one wash, one wear, all your hard work is just going to literally unravel. We don't want that. So we do what's called a backstitch or a backtack or reversing at the ends of every seam that you stitch. If we take note of this one here, try and pull this one apart. Yeah, it's not going anywhere. I cannot pull that apart. So by doing this little backstitch, it creates a little lock, and it actually locks that seam in place, so keep all of your hard work intact. Now, let me demonstrate how to do this on your machine. Let's get nice and cozy for this one. So it's really, really easy. All you have to do is get your fabric in place as you would normally start sewing. And what you want to do is go forward first a couple of stitches, 3 or 4 stitches. Yeah. And then you go backwards or reversing the same 3 or 4 stitches. Now, your reversing function on newer machines might be up here like mine, and it's kind of got this like reverse arrow that kind of indicates going backwards around in a loop. That's it there. On an older machine, you might have a little like lever down here somewhere that that will, you know, sort of engage the reverse function of the sewing machine, and it just is going to sew backwards. So then we go, once you've found your reverse button, then we're just going to go backwards the same 3 or 4 stitches. Yeah? So we've just gone backwards. Now we just want to go forwards and continue our seam sewing as per normal. By doing that simple little reversing, that backstitch, that backtack at every start and finish of every seam that you do, we'll just hold it in place, and look at that. Can't pull it out, it's not going anywhere. Your beautiful garment will be safe. So it's super easy, right? Just that tiny little reversing stitches make all the difference and will keep your work intact. And that's what we want. If this is your first time learning this and you're very new to sewing, you might want to check out some of my other videos that I've done, particularly maybe 3 tips for all new sewers to avoid that dreaded thread jam, you know, when you get that giant ball of nastiness on your fabric. I'm going to link the video up here so you need to know those tips there. And of course, watch the rest of this series to increase your knowledge about all these types of things about sewing. You'll learn so much. Every little bit that you learn will increase your knowledge and will make you a better dressmaker, better fashion designer yourself. So please let me know below which term you like to call this. As I said, I call it a backtack. That's what I learnt when I was learning to sew, so that's what's just ingrained in my memory now. I like to know what you actually call this kind of stitch. And please, of course, like this video if you liked it, share it if you found it useful and you think other people might find it useful too. And until next time, bye!